Lectures and discourses, soul, God, and religion. Through the vistas of the past, the voice of the centuries is coming down to us, the voice of the sages of the Himalayas and the recluses of the forest, the voice that came to the Semitic races, the voice that spoke through Buddha and other spiritual giants, the voice that comes from those who live in the light that accompanied man in the beginning of the earth, the light that shines wherever man goes and lives with him forever, is coming to us even now. This voice is like the little rivulets that come from the mountains. Now they disappear and now they appear even again in stronger flow till finally they unite in one mighty majestic flood. The messages that are coming down to us from the prophets and holy men and women of all sections and nations are joining their forces and speaking to us with the trumpet voice of the past. And the first message it brings us is, peace be on to you and to all religions. It is not a message of antagonism, but of one united religion. Let us study this message first. At the beginning of this century, it was almost feared that religion was at an end. Under the tremendous sledgehammer blows of scientific research, old superstitions were crumbling away like masses of porcelain. Those to whom religion meant only a bundle of creeds and meaningless ceremonials were in despair. They were at their wits' end. Everything was slipping between their fingers. For a time, it seemed inevitable that the surging tide of agnosticism and materialism would sweep all before it. There were those who did not dare utter what they thought. Many thought the case hopeless and the cause of religion lost once and forever. But the tide has turned, and to the rescue has come what? The study of comparative religions. By the study of different religions, we find that in essence they are one. When I was a boy, this skepticism reached me, and it seemed for a time as if I must give up all hope of religion. But fortunately for me, I studied the Christian religion, the Mohammedan, the Buddhistic, and others, and what was my surprise to find that the same foundation principles taught by my religion were also taught by all religions. It appealed to me this way. What is the truth? I asked. Is the world true? Yes. Why? Because I see it. Are the beautiful sounds we just heard, the vocal and instrumental music, true? Yes, because we heard them. We know that man has a body, eyes and ears, and he has a spiritual nature which we cannot see. And with his spiritual faculties, he can study these different religions and find that whether a religion is taught in the forests and jungles of India or in a Christian land, in essential, all religions are one. This only shows us that religion is a constitutional necessity of the human mind. The proof of one religion depends on the proof of all the rest. For instance, if I have 6 fingers and no one else has, you may well say that it is abnormal. The same reasoning may be applied to the argument that only one religion is true and all others false. One religion only, like one set of 6 fingers in the world, would be unnatural. We see, therefore, that if one religion is true, all others must be true. There are differences in non-essentials, but in essentials they are all one. If my 5 fingers are true, then prove that your 5 fingers are true too. Wherever man is, he must develop a belief, he must develop his religious nature. And another fact I find in the study of the various religions of the world is that there are 3 different stages of ideas with regard to the soul and God. In the first place, all religions admit that apart from the body which perishes, there is a certain part or something which does not change like the body, a part that is immutable, eternal, that never dies. But some of the later religions teach that although there is a part of us that never dies, it has a beginning. But anything that has a beginning must necessarily have an end. We, the essential part of us, never had a beginning and will never have an end. And above us all, above this eternal nature, there is another eternal being without end, God. People talk about the beginning of the world and beginning of man. The word beginning simply means the beginning of the cycle. It nowhere means the beginning of the whole cosmos. It is impossible that creation could have a beginning. No one of you can imagine a time of beginning. That which has a beginning must have an end. Never did I not exist, nor you, nor will any of us ever hereafter cease to be, says the Bhagavad Gita. Wherever the beginning of creation is mentioned, it mentions the beginning of a cycle. Your body will meet with death, but your soul never. Along with this idea of the soul, we find another group of ideas in regard to its perfection. The soul in itself is perfect. The Old Testament of the Hebrews admits man perfect at the beginning. Man made himself impure by his own actions, but he is to regain his old nature, his pure nature. Some speak of these things in allegories, fables, and symbols. But when we begin to analyze these statements, we find that they all teach that the human soul is in its very perfect nature and that man is to regain that original purity. How? By knowing God. Just as the Bible says, no man can see God but through the Son. What is meant by it? That seeing God is the aim and goal of all human life. The sonship must come before we become one with the Father. Remember that man lost his purity through his own actions. When we suffer, it is because of our own acts. God is not to be blamed for it. Closely connected with these ideas is the doctrine which was universal before the Europeans mutilated it, the doctrine of reincarnation. Some of you may have heard of and ignored it. This idea of reincarnation runs parallel with the other doctrines of the eternity of the human soul. Nothing which ends at one point can be without a beginning, and nothing that begins at one point can be without an end. We cannot believe in such a monstrous impossibility as the beginning of the human soul. The doctrine of reincarnation asserts the freedom of the soul. Suppose there was an absolute beginning, then the whole burden of this impurity in man falls upon God, the all-merciful Father responsible for the sins of the world. If sin comes in this way, why should one suffer more than another? Why such partiality if it comes from all-merciful God? Why are millions trampled underfoot? Why do people starve who never did anything to cause it? Who's responsible? If they had no hand in it, surely God would be responsible. Therefore, the better explanation is that one is responsible for the miseries one suffers. If I set the wheel in motion, I am responsible for the result. And if I can bring misery, I can also stop it. It necessarily follows that we are free. There is no such thing as fate. There is nothing to compel us. What we have done, that we can undo. To one argument in connection with this doctrine, I will ask your patient attention, as it is little intricate. We gain all our knowledge through experience. That is the only way. What we call experiences are on the plane of consciousness. For illustration, a man plays a tune on a piano. He places each finger on each key consciously. He repeats this process till the movements of the fingers becomes a habit. He then plays a tune without having to pay special attention to that particular key. Similarly, we find in regards to ourselves that our techniques are the results of past conscious actions. A child is born with certain tendencies. Whence do they come? No child is born with a tabula rasa, with a clean blank page of a mind. The page has been written on previously. The old Greek and Egyptian philosophers taught that no child came with a vacant mind. Each child comes with 100 tendencies generated by past conscious actions. It did not acquire these in this life, but we are bound to admit that it must have had them in past lives. The rankest materialist has to admit that these tendencies are the result of past actions. Only they add to these tendencies come through heredity. Our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents come down to us through this law of heredity. Now, if heredity alone explains this, there is no necessity of believing in the soul at all, because body explains everything. We need not go into different arguments and discussions on materialism and spiritualism. So far, the way is clear for those who believe in an individual soul. We see that to come to a reasonable conclusion, we must admit that we have had past lives. This is the belief of the great philosophers and sages of the past and of modern times. Such a doctrine was believed in amongst the Jews. Jesus Christ believed in it. He says in the Bible, before Abraham was, I am. And in another place it is said, it is Elias who is said to have come. All the different religions which grew among different nations under varying circumstances and conditions had their origin in Asia, and the Asiatics understand them well. When they came out from the motherland, they got mixed up with errors. The most profound and noble ideas of Christianity were never understood in Europe because the ideas and images used by the writers of the Bible were foreign to it. Take for illustration the pictures of Madonna. Every artist paints the Madonna according to his own preconceived ideas. I have been seeing hundreds of pictures of the Last Supper of Jesus Christ, and he's made to sit at a table. Now, Christ never sat at a table. He squatted with others, and they had a bowl in which they dipped bread, not the kind of bread you eat today. It is hard for any nation to understand the unfamiliar customs of other people. How much more difficult was it for Europeans to understand the Jewish customs after centuries of changes and accretions from Greek, Roman, and other sources? Through all the myths and mythologies by which it is surrounded, it is no wonder that the people get very little of the beautiful religion of Jesus, and no wonder that they have made of it a modern shopkeeping religion. To come to our point, we find that all religions teach the eternity of the soul, as well as that its lustre has been dimmed and that its primitive purity is to be regained by the knowledge of God. What is the idea of God in these different religions? The primary idea of God was very vague. The most ancient nations had different deities: sun, earth, fire, water. Among the ancient Jews, we find numbers of these gods ferociously fighting with each other. Then we find Elohim, whom the Jews and the Babylonians worshipped. We next find one God standing supreme, but the idea differed according to the different tribes. They each asserted that their God was the greatest, and they tried to prove it by fighting. The one that could do the best fighting proved thereby that its God was the greatest. Those races were more or less savage, but gradually better and better ideas took the place of the old ones. All those old ideas are gone or going into the lumber room. All these religions were the outgrowth of centuries. Not one fell from the skies. Each had to be worked out bit by bit. Next come the monotheistic ideas, belief in one God who is omnipotent and omniscient, the one God of the universe. This one God is extra-cosmic. He lies in the heavens. He is invested in the gross conceptions of his originators. He has a right side and the left side and a bird in his hand, and so on and so forth. But one thing we find, that the tribal gods have disappeared forever, and the one God of the universe has taken their place, the God of gods. Still, he is the only and extra-cosmic God. He is unapproachable, nothing can come near him. But slowly this idea has changed also, and at the next stage we find a God immanent in nature.